So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker for the morning, Ben Zvan, who is, I got his name right this time, who is going to be talking about some of the things that I was just discussing, about getting rid of silos, and then what do you do if you can't, because you're on a single team and you don't have that executive buy-in yet. So he's going to tell you more about his journey to change academia when silos are locked in. Ben.
Thank you for that introduction. That was a lot of the stuff that I'm planning on talking about. So it's an excellent lead-in to my topic. I want to thank you all for showing up after all the parties last night. I know that probably half of you, are the people who stuck around for the Ignites, are maybe a little hungover at the moment. And I want to mention that I am proud to be up on stage speaking for my underrepresented group of middle-aged white guys. But seriously, I'm the diversity in this conference and the voices that we don't usually get to hear have been absolutely amazing, and I'm proud to be among them. So I'm going to start out with how I got into DevOps. When I started in IT as in operations about 10 years ago, the first war file deploys that I did to Tomcat were running a script. Nobody knew how it worked. The person who wrote it wasn't there anymore. If it failed, I don't know. We'll try to figure it out. We'll try to fix it. We'll restart things. We'll try to run it again, whatever. And later on, there was a script that, in fact, I did know who wrote it, but it did all these weird cargo cult things. Like, at one point, we had a war file that you had to restart Tomcat in order to get it to come up. So the script does that. And we also had to delete the work directory, so the script does that too. And there are a bunch of these other little things that really you don't have to do. And it was indicative of a lack of communication between the dev team and the ops team. So this is something that I've been working toward for at least 10 years, trying to increase that collaboration and cooperation and get it to the point where these deploy scripts actually do the things that will deploy something to production successfully every time, rather than just do all these weird things that somebody had to do once. So we're talking about DevOps. I'm glad that so many of you are new, so I can actually get to talk about what DevOps is, because that is sort of a tradition with talks about DevOps, is that you have to define DevOps, because nobody has really come up with a formal definition that I'm aware of. And it's different for everybody because it's all about the communication and collaboration, but there's no, it's not a prescriptive framework. It's not a descriptive framework. It's not ITIL, it's a philosophy. So for me, DevOps is a culture of collaboration, empathy, and inclusion of diverse people and groups working toward the same goal of consistent quality software delivery. That's the primary thing. And you'll see I've broken this up into culture, practice, and tools. And I'm not really going to talk very much about tools. Tools are whatever gets the job done, whatever keeps people from doing repetitive tasks, whatever keeps people from making mistakes that break things. And practices, again, we're going to talk about communication and continuous delivery. And the culture and practice are kind of one and the same. So to go a little bit more in depth on what DevOps is before talking about how to get it into a siloed environment, the primary thing is empathy for me. You don't want to have an antagonistic environment. You want to have, instead of you and me, it's us. We're working together. We both have to have this thing working in production. The empathy, understanding what other people have to deal with and understanding how your decisions affect them and their work-life balance. Understanding that if you do something on Friday afternoon and walk out the door, somebody else might get paged in a few hours, or Sunday morning, and they're not going to like you. And you don't want them to do that to you. So this empathy creates a shared sense of ownership in a product and a shared sense of a relationship that you're all in it together and you're all trying to do the same thing. So diversity and inclusion, obviously we're getting dev and ops working together. Those are diverse groups. They've always been diverse groups with diverse skill sets. We're also bringing in QA, we're bringing in security, we're bringing in business analysts, we're bringing in business interests and the CIO level if you want to go that high, or the CEO. And get the dogs and cats working together, get everybody with that shared sense of ownership, and move beyond organizational diversity and inclusion, because there are a lot of underrepresented groups that there is talent that you don't see if you go through the normal hiring practices and you're just going out and posting on Monster and waiting for resumes to come in. You need to actually go out and aim for diversity and inclusion. And it's not just having a person of color on your team, it's not just having a woman on your team, it's listening to these people and valuing their inputs in the process. Collaboration, obviously, it flows out of empathy and out of diversity. I guess I probably don't really need to spend a lot of time on this, but collaboration versus cooperation is an important distinction. I think everybody here probably cooperates to a certain extent with their coworkers and other teams, but collaboration is a step beyond that. Cooperation is people working separately in different cubes, in different rooms, in different teams toward the same goal. Collaboration is people working together toward that same goal. And it's a subtle distinction, but it's very important and very important to my idea of DevOps. Clear communications paths. This is, we're into practice now. Clear communications paths are really important. You need to know who to talk to when there's a problem. You need to be able to, as an operator, and I'm going to talk about a lot of things as an operator because that's where most of my experience lies. You need to be able to, when something breaks in production, you need to know who to talk to about it, right? So you need to have an idea of who runs things. And as developers, when developers have problems that they're trying to troubleshoot, they need to know who in operations is most likely to have the answer that they need. Another practice that I try to promote as much as possible is cross-training. I want people to know as much about other people's jobs as possible. I want to know how to write SQL queries. I may not be good at it, but I do want to know how to do it. I want to know how to write Java, and again, I'm not good at it, but I know how to do it. I understand the concepts behind it, and that helps me build more empathy with other teams. It also saves me a little bit of time because I don't have to go to the DBA team and say, hey, can you run this query for me? Because I can probably just go and grab that data and find out what's going on myself if I have access to the database. It also, cross-training also helps build empathy, because if you know some of the pitfalls of writing Java or writing SQL or dealing with security, then you understand the kind of impact that your work can have on those other teams and the kind of impact that, or the kind of problems that those people have to deal with. So you can help them out and you can work together. And all of this leads to situational awareness. I think we all know this guy. If he had had better situational awareness, if he had known what was going on around him, I think he would have had a better day. But he didn't, and I think we can all learn from that. Early communication on projects, early communication on changes, knowing that someone has started up the engine of the plane next to you, knowing that somebody's going to go and make a change in production when you're going on call. All of this stuff is things that are going to make your life easier, and you're not going to have as many surprises. Taking Agile to operations is another thing that I find really important in DevOps. And having these feedback loops, you're not just doing the unit testing and the QA testing, right? You're also doing production monitoring. You're also looking at your infrastructure. And these feedback loops go both directions. So if QA finds a problem that's caused by some infrastructure like a firewall or a version of Java or something like that, that feedback loop goes around to operations. And yeah, I could probably make this all concentric circles, but I thought the infinity sign was pretty cool. So keeping that communication, keeping those feedback loops, keeping them fast, and making sure that you have people working on doing continuous testing, automated testing, not just in the development process, but also in production and also on the real running machines, because that's where you have your real users and that's where you have the real information. That's the most real load test you can possibly do. And of course, automation, 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 automation. Don't have high-value people doing low-value tasks. Don't have people logging into a system, running a script, and logging out. Cron does that. Monet does that. Nagios will do that. There are so many more valuable things that people could be doing, improving the system and not logging into systems where they can accidentally break things because people make mistakes. And again, I'm not going to talk about specific tools because there are so many out there. Excuse me. There are so many out there that just pick the one that's going to work. And like the last speaker yesterday said, don't be afraid of picking the wrong tool. You will pick the wrong tool. Change tools later. So now onto the meat of the talk. When you're introducing DevOps to your teams, you may get a little resistance. They may find your lack of silos disturbing. There are a lot of reasons that people like silos. And I know for this crowd, it probably sounds a little bit strange, but people do like silos. They're comfortable, they're safe, they're what we've always been doing. And people see a value in silos, and it's important to understand why we have them and why people want to keep them. How many people have an org chart that looks kind of like this? Not as many as I thought. That's good. So this is silos, right? It looks like silos. It's people grouped by function. There's very little communication between them. They might report to a completely different reporting structure. And there's a lot of antagonism between groups because developers throw the app over the wall, production puts it in, it breaks, they don't know how to fix it. And they just blame each other. The DBAs say it's not the database. The network says it's not the firewall. And it's bad. I think we all know that, so I'll go on. I just exited my slideshow. All right, so why do we have silos? There is perceived efficiency in silos. You could have a system where you've got a developer and an operator, or a bunch of developers and an operator, or for the bus factor, 2 operators, maybe 3 operators on every development team. That's great. But now you've got 9 development teams and 27 operators to support those development teams. Or you could have 9 people in operations and 9 development groups, and that operations team can serve all those groups together, right? So people don't want to shift to application teams because they think we're going to have to hire more people, and we don't want to do that because that costs money. They also tend to gather knowledge into a space. So you can have a operations team that is really good at operations, and they can share. If one person doesn't know how to do a thing, maybe somebody else does, probably somebody else does, and you concentrate a lot of that brain power in one place, which can be great. But you'll notice I'm already talking a little bit about collaboration just within the operations team because you're getting that conversation going. Operational security and separation of duties is another really strong perceived benefit of silos. If you have an operations team that runs production, development doesn't know the passwords. Development can't break things because development always breaks things, right? So if you can keep them out of production, you can have a better day because you control all the change in production. Fear. The worst reason to have silos. Fear of change. People have always been in silos. They don't want to have more work. They don't want people to break things. They don't want to talk to people. Last time I talked to a developer, they got mad at me. I'm not going to talk to developers anymore. I'm going to talk to my group, and we're going to use tickets. having to learn new skills, because you get a lot of people who have been operations, they love Linux, they don't want to learn Windows, they don't want to learn Java. They just want to do the thing that they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years, or 5 years, or the thing they learned how to do in college. And they have a sense of job security because they've been doing this, they know they can do this. If the developers learn how to do stuff in production, maybe I'm not necessary anymore. So the trick, for me at least, has been to introduce DevOps a little bit at a time. You want to get development and operations working together, because that is the core of DevOps. It's right there in the name. You want to keep people from getting fearful about change, and you can introduce some of these benefits without coming in with a bulldozer and tearing down all the silos. So what can developers learn from operations? Usually operations thinks that these are really obvious things. I mean, obvious, right? So data and security, one of the big reasons that we want to keep silos. Developers can learn more about the things that operations has to deal with in production. They can learn more about password breaches just from logging people's passwords, from putting passwords in URLs. These are all things I've seen, by the way. You can instill that sense of security. You can get the security team involved, and you can have a little group session and talk about, here are all the things that as developers you can do to make our lives in production easier when it comes to security. Monitoring and alerting. And this is a really great trend that I've seen in development, but operations has been doing monitoring and alerting forever, right? We set up cron jobs on the original systems to tell us when something broke. But what often happens, because production is monitored by operations, is you see a problem, and then somebody reboots it. And then in this case, the problem went someplace else. And what's going to happen there is that's going to page somebody, and they're going to reboot it. Because it's Saturday, and I don't know who to call. So the more monitoring and on-call you can get that goes to development teams, so that they can see how their stuff is working in production, they can see the problems that they're running into and they're causing, then you can have a better day for operations and development. Because we might want to call somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday because we've rebooted the system 3 times and it's still not up. So yeah, there are a lot of metrics that people are getting into the code. We're getting method level reporting, and the more data you can have, the more instrumentation you can have on your code and on your systems, the more you can predict when something like that's going to happen and prevent it ahead of time. Scripting repetitive tasks is something that operations has been doing forever. And development can also do this. Development has a lot of repetitive tasks. They have build processes. They have setting up a development environment, deploying a WAR file. I can't actually count the number of times I've talked to developers about doing automated deploys to production when they're just copying a file. And you don't have to do that. You can have something do that for you. You don't have to waste your time waiting for this thing to copy. So we can get that culture of automation going all the way through the enterprise. What can operations learn from development? This is one of my favorite XKCDs. I do write code. My code runs a lot of systems and a lot of deploys and a lot of monitoring, and I'm not a coder. I never learned to code, not formally anyway. No, that's not true. I took 1 Pascal class in college. So my code probably does look like somebody took a transcript of a couple arguing at IKEA and made random edits until it compiled. But it seems to work. Or I could go and I could talk to developers and I could say, hey, can you look at my code and can you tell me how I can improve this? Or we can work together and say, hey, I need a tool that does this thing. You do things with this language that does this thing. Let's work together and let's create this thing. You can do pair programming with developers. You can do pair ops, which I know is a big thing lately. Developers do all this stuff already, We can do it too. Agile in operations. I guess the picture doesn't really illustrate it, but she is pretty agile, and I love taking that photo. So iteration, continuous integration, the concept of a minimum viable product. These are all things that Agile does, the continuous feedback loops. These are all things that development has been doing for quite a while, and operations hasn't really gotten into it. So we can start looking at that kind of thing, and we can start saying, what are some ways that we can do better code testing, which is my next slide. What are some ways that we can say, all right, I know you need this thing, and it's going to take me like 2 months to get it to be really good, but I'm going to give you something you can use now. Test-driven development. This is a little bit odd for me to think about even, but did you know that Bash has unit testing? You can write a Bash script and you can unit test the Bash script. And then you can know this thing that's supposed to go and copy Apache files over here and then reconfigure and run sed and do all this stuff, it's actually going to do that. And when you run it, it's actually going to do the thing you wanted it to do. And Python, all these things, you can know whether your API that's going to start up a VMware machine is actually going to respond correctly to that API, to the VMware's API, and actually start up a machine with the right configuration. Automated testing is something that dev and ops can work together with to get going into production. Automated end user testing is something that, it's actually something that I'm trying to work on a lot myself. It comes straight out of the concept of monitoring, which is something that operations has been doing forever. Go hit this web page, make sure that the content is there that we expect. Yes, it's good. We don't need to tell anybody it's down. You get more stability in production by doing automated end user testing because you've already tested everything and you can have a thing crawling through occasionally even as part of your monitor. You get a full regression test suite that you can run as a monitor and you can know every part of your system is working. It decreases testing delays at deployment time. I should have read that out loud before trying to do it here. So how many people do production deploys? How many people have had to wait for manual smoke testing during their production deploys? How many people think that's a waste of time? So I get up at 1 o'clock in the morning, I push my button, my thing goes into production, and then I sit there for 4 hours waiting for somebody to make sure that the system is working the way it's supposed to, because they go and they open up a browser and they go through and they test everything, and then that one's okay, and then they go and open up another browser. And then they make sure it's working in Firefox, and then they make sure it's working in Chrome, and then they make sure it's working in Opera. You can automate that. There are tools for that. There's no reason for a human to do that. And we in operations can help support that by building the systems that can run it. You can use cloud services. You can use Selenium, Chrome driver, whatever you want to do. But there are ways that you can automate this, and everyone's life will be happier. And like I said, once you've got an automated regression suite, you can run it as part of your monitoring. And then you know, hey, this one login button isn't working, or this one piece of embedded code that's supposed to be there isn't showing up because the other service is down and we don't have good tooling on it. Infrastructure as code. This is traditionally something that operations thinks they're doing for themselves. They are wrong. Infrastructure as code gives you the ability to stand up systems rapidly for development teams. It gives you the ability to do zero outage deployments. You can stand up a full system, deploy an entirely new system onto it, run your automated regression tests on it, it works okay, switch users over to it and tear down the old one. Nobody knows you've done anything. And you can do it in a few minutes if you've got everything tooled up right. It makes the testing viable everywhere, right? So if you built your systems in dev and QA and production all from the same source, they all look the same, and you don't have a developer coming over here saying, well, it works in dev. Why is it not working in production? What did you do? Punching holes in silos. If you're not going to tear down the silos, at least start to cut holes in the silos. Make sure that you can talk to people. I alluded to this earlier, but every developer should know someone in production ideally 2 or 3 people in production, or production operations, sorry, everybody's in production, should know somebody in operations who knows their application, or at least knows how to deploy and run their application. And every person in operations should know a developer they can talk to about the application, so that we're not sitting there at our desks going, it's broken, I don't know why, I don't know who to talk to. I'll go talk to my boss and see if my boss knows who to talk to, and then maybe we'll get around to fixing it once we figure out how to get a ticket in. And yeah, don't do that. Value the diversity of thought and experience that other people have. You're in operations or you're in development. You're really good at operations. You're really good at development, right? Developers don't know anything about running production systems. Well, actually, they've got some really good ideas, and you should listen to them. And operations doesn't have any idea what we go through in development. Actually, we do, because we write a lot of code. We do a lot of development, and we have ideas. The value of diversity of thought extends beyond developers and operations and QA and the business. It extends to underserved minority populations and women. I'll throw out an example. Microsoft had a screen recognition login that wouldn't log in black people because it couldn't see them. Do you think they had any people of color on their test team? Probably not. Either that or they gave them really good lighting, which is a bad solution. I think I'm going to spend more time than I intended on this slide, because there are a lot of things that came up yesterday on diversity and inclusion that I think are great. I joked about representing middle-aged white men. If you look at the morning tracks, I'm the only middle-aged white man speaking. And everyone else speaking is far more qualified to be speaking than I am. And if you went to monster.com and posted your job posting, or if you trolled LinkedIn, and you look at all these places you've always been looking for people, you're going to get a team that looks like me, and you're going to miss out on those other 7 people. And you're going to get me, who's competent. You're not going to get them, who are amazing. So have a plan. Talk to your HR department. If your company doesn't have a plan to increase diversity and doesn't promote inclusion in the workplace, try to get that to change or leave. And I'm serious about that. If you talk to your HR department and they say something like, yeah, we'd like to have more diversity, but we just don't have any women applying for development jobs. That's just ridiculous. If you don't have women applying, ask women to apply. There's a lot of research, actually, that says that women and minorities have been trained over their lifetime to not believe in their abilities as much as men have been trained to. As much as white men have been trained to. So if you post a job posting and it's got this long list of requirements, men are really likely to put in their resume even if they don't meet half of them. So you're going to see a lot more resumes from men. But if you actually go out and talk to minority groups and underserved populations and say, hey, I think you should apply for this, they will, usually. Just make the effort. Last thing I'm going to say about that, almost every job that I've had has been a referral. I have not had to go and look for jobs for the last 25 years. It's privilege. I have it. And we need to extend that privilege to other people. Leading up. If you're a manager, or more likely if you're a director or above, you can say, we're going to do DevOps. If you're some management or below, you maybe can't say that, which is why I'm here talking about this. Be the change that you want to be. Show that you want to communicate and collaborate with other people. Show that you want to make the environment better. Start that conversation. Start working with developers. Start working with operations and QA and security. Make sure that when you see uninclusive language, if you see somebody telling a bad racist joke, tell them to quit it. bring everybody together as much as you can and show that there's a benefit to it, and convince people that it's a good thing. Eventually, management should catch on. If they don't, quit. There are lots of places that are hiring right now. Go someplace else. There are challenges on this road. It can be very hard because silos get really embedded, and it's really hard to get between them and have that conversation, get things started. You need to find what drives other people, and that can be really hard, especially for a lot of people like me. I am a major introvert. I've learned to play an extrovert, but I have a really hard time talking to people I don't know. I have a hard time talking to 750 people I don't know. So finding what drives other people, finding how to get to those people you want to not talk to. And I'm not talking about the people you don't want to talk to. I'm talking about the people you want to not talk to. When you see them in the hallway, you turn around. Those people, if you can't get them out of your environment, you're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to find out what their motivation is. If they're unhelpful, you're going to have to find a way to help them collaborate and find out that it's good for them. I really hate the argument from selfishness, but in a lot of cases, it's what will motivate people. Talking about, Nicole's talk yesterday was talking about the bottom line. The entire metrics around DevOps supports doing DevOps is a good thing. It will help you be a profitable company. And I don't think that's the right reason to do things, but it's a reason a lot of people will listen to, and it's an important one. So let's come back to what's a silo. Silos are functional groups grouped by what people do with restricted communication between silos. And if you've been paying attention to my keeping the silos and introducing DevOps, you've noticed we just tore down all the silos. We did it slowly, but we ended up with a pile of rubble, and we have people communicating. We have the same org chart that we had originally, but everybody is actually doing DevOps. And it may not be the kind of DevOps other people do, but it's the kind of DevOps that you're doing. And if you're doing DevOps, you're doing DevOps. There are ways to not do DevOps. There are not ways to do DevOps wrong, in my opinion. So the more windows that you punch in those silos, the weaker they become, and the more communication and collaboration you're going to get, the more effective you're going to be, the happier you're going to be, the better a company you're going to be for your local environment and the world at large. And if you are looking for other things to look at, and a lot of the resources that I found very useful, Effective DevOps, which I heard about last year at devopsdays and read over the winter. You can tell this was put together before July when it wasn't early release anymore. Amazing book. It's geared toward management primarily, but as an individual contributor, I found a lot of value in it. Part of that value was seeing what management needs to improve on, and that gave me some more opportunities for leading up. The book Continuous Delivery, I would hope everybody's heard of it or looked at it at this point, but that really helped me get an idea of what developers deal with and some of the challenges that they have and how they've solved those challenges. Michael Ducey's around here somewhere. The Goat in the Silo was recommended to me by Bridget when I was accepted for this talk, and I rewrote some of my talk based on watching that video. So I strongly recommend you go and just Google The Goat in the Silo. You'll find it. Lots of great stuff on there talking about getting that collaboration going, getting talk between the silos, and how if you create a DevOps team for an application, you have to be really careful because you might just create an application silo. And you need to keep that conversation going between applications because you might be producing a web service that other people are consuming, but you're not talking to those other people. So when you make a change, their stuff breaks and they didn't know it was coming. And I think the most important thing on this list is the implicit bias tests that Harvard put out. There's a disclaimer on the opening page for the implicit bias test that says that these scientifically designed and statistically valid tests will probably tell you things you don't want to know about yourself. They use this technique of images to show your bias for gender or for race or for sexual orientation. And when you get down to the end, you get something like, you somewhat prefer white people. And it's a real eye-opener to see that and realize that implicitly, not something that you even think about, because these tests they're not asking you, do you prefer white people? They're doing this direct-to-brain connection, basically, through your screen to just find out what your internal associations are between these images. And when you get to the end and you go, wow, okay, so wait a minute, this means that I don't think of myself as a racist, but I have implicit bias that's going to push me in directions where I prefer white people and men, just in general. And it gives you targets to go for it where you can say, you know, okay, is this my back of my brain telling me I should be doing this? Or is there something I could do that's better for myself, for my company, for society, for minorities? That's all I have.